You know, there's no shortage of YouTube videos giving advice on how much money you should have saved for retirement by certain ages. But as a financial advisor for the last 20 years, I've got a different take on this subject that I hope you find helpful. But before we jump in, I just want to share one caution. You know, these numbers are aspirational. They're hard to get to. In fact, the average American, by the time that they're 65, only has 4 times their salary saved for retirement. And you do the best that you can, but you know, unfortunately, that's not a lot of money. So let's go for a walk. Let's talk about how I look at how much money people should have saved by certain ages for retirement. And you know, don't be discouraged by this. It's supposed to be aspirational. It's supposed to help you achieve your goals. So let's jump in and let's start off with 20-year-olds and then we'll work our way up. So with 20-year-olds, you know, the reality is, you know, a lot of people are just finishing trade school or just finishing college. So believe it or not, the net worth is actually negative and pretty substantially negative for the average 20-year-old in America. Their net worth is worse than negative $20,000. So they have more than $20,000 in debt that they have to pay. And that's to be expected, right? Getting educated in today's world's expensive, whether that's trade school or college for you. You know, and what's a good salary goal? You know, it's hard to say. I think, you know, early on in your career, you're not making much money anyways. And I think most people are better served to pick the opportunity that sets them up for the future better, whether that's getting them into an industry that they're interested in or with the right mentor, with the right boss. So that's how I think about salary. But that said, you know, if you can make 3 to 4 times the national minimum wage, which is $7.25. So if you can be in the category of 3 to 4 times that, I think you're doing okay. If your company offers a 401k match, you know, it'd be nice if you can get at least put money into the 401k up until the match. And because you're so young, if the company offers a Roth 401k, I think it's worth exploring looking into that. Also, the sooner you can get an emergency fund set up, something with 2 to 3 times your monthly spending, that will give you options later on. Let's say you get laid off or you decide to quit your job. That gives you options. And the last thing I'm going to share about people in their 20s is, you know, give yourself freedom to do some adventures. You know, most of your friends probably are not married yet. They don't have mortgages yet. They have a lot more flexibility. If a friend wants to go backpacking through Europe or staying at hostels in Southeast Asia or you know, renting a ski house for the winter, it's going to be hard to get those opportunities again. So this is heresy coming from a financial advisor, but you know, if you have to spend down that emergency fund, this is a special opportunity in your life. So give it some thought, okay? Okay. So you've got a little bit of money invested in your 20s, and then the important thing that I want to stress here is that it's invested. It's not enough to just save. You need to invest it. Okay, so by the time you're 30, I think there's a couple financial goals that are helpful. The first is, to the extent you can avoid having a car loan or credit card loans, credit card debt, right? If you can pay off your credit card every month, that's a good practice to get into. Again, this is by the time you're 30. I think it's also a good practice to be saving 15 to 25% of your salary at this age by the time you're 30. And you know, when you graduated college or learned a new trade, while you're in the process, you weren't making much money. So I would encourage you to keep your expenses low. You know, going from sharing a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 other people to having your own 1-bedroom apartment or sharing a 2-bedroom apartment, that's a move up. And making those kind of trade-offs where you're just incrementally increasing your lifestyle should make it pretty easy to save 15 to 25%. Where it gets hard is if you jump up your lifestyle right away, right? I'd suggest doing it incrementally. I'd suggest future raises. Half goes to current you and half goes to future you. So try to save half of it. Again, the goal is to save 15 to 25%. Still want to do the 401k to the match. You still want to be invested. And I think having 1 to 3 times your salary saved makes sense. And I know I said I have a different tack on it. Stay tuned. I'm going to give you a different benchmark here pretty soon, other than just multiples of salary. But by the time you're 30, if you have 1 to 3 times your salary saved, I think you're in a good place. And many people in this age group are starting to think about, do I want to own a home? So maybe think about that in saving money for the 20% down payment on a house. Okay, so now by the time you're 40, now I want you to be really thinking seriously about a topic that I've talked about in previous videos, which is the 3 bucket strategy. I want you to think about where your money is invested, right? You have tax deferred accounts, which is like a traditional IRA, a traditional 401k. Then you have what I call a tax me now, but don't tax me later account. And those are the Roth 401ks and the Roth IRAs. And then you have the tax me as I go account. And you want to have some of your money in each of these areas. How much is a topic that's more involved than I can get into in the video, and it also involves your specific situation. I always recommend that you speak with a fee-only financial advisor or an accountant to help you think through this. But what you're trying to avoid is having all of your money like in a 401k or an IRA, where when you're retired, every dollar, if these are regular IRAs, every dollar you take out is taxable income. So you want to, as Stephen Covey says, you want to begin with the end in mind. That is for by your 40s and 3 to 5 times your salary saved up by the time you're 40, not in your 40s, but by the time you're 40. And I said I have a different take on this, and most of the videos I see have benchmarks of X times your salary. But when you think about it, it's not necessarily a multiple of your salary that's important. It's a multiple of how much you think you're going to be spending in retirement. So I think up till 40, a multiple of salary is okay, because how do you know what you're going to want to spend in your late 50s or early 60s, right? But by the time you're 40, you probably have a pretty good feel for what those numbers are. So I think it's good, again, going back to Stephen Covey's beginning with the end in mind. What's the end in mind? Sometime in your 50s, if you're hoping to retire before 60, sometime in your 50s, you really want to hit 25 times your annual spending. And this is after other sources of income. So if you have rental properties or you have other sources of income coming in, so it's 25 times your annual spending that's going to come from your investment accounts. I hope that makes sense. So let's say it's let's say I want to spend $100,000 a year, just to give myself easy math. Half of that's going to come from other sources of income. So I need $50,000 a year to come from my investment accounts. Well, 25 times 50,000 is $1.25 million. So that's the end in mind, right? That's where we're going. And so now I'm going to switch over. Instead of talking of multiples of salary, I'm going to talk about multiples of spending. Okay, so by the time you're in your 50s, by the time you're 50, actually, I want you to think about having at least 12 times your spending. And what that does is between 50 and 65, you have 15 years for that 12 times spending to grow to 25 times your spending. Again, this is the spending that your investment accounts are going to need, right? So you have 15 years for that to double. But if you want to retire at 55, then you got to be a lot closer to that 25 times spending. Again, using that $50,000 a year is going to come from your investment accounts. Then your investment account, by the time you retire, has to be worth $1.25 million. And if you're 50 years old and you want to retire at 52, you should probably have at least $1 million, preferably closer to 1.1, $1.15 million. So I hope all of that makes sense. So instead of doing a multiple of salary, let's switch over and do a multiple of spending. Again, the goal is to get to 25 times what we're looking to do. So by the time you're 50, depending on when you want to retire, anywhere from 12 times spending, if you're thinking you're going to retire at 65, that gives you 15 years for that 12 times spending to double. I think for a lot of folks, that's a reasonable number. There's no guarantees out there. This isn't financial advice. Again, my goal here is to give you things to think about, and then you talk with a financial advisor for your specific situation, okay? I still want you thinking about the 3 buckets. You've got the tax deferred account, you've got the tax me now but not later, and then the tax me as I go, the taxable account. And having money split between those 3 buckets. And again, super important that this money's invested. It's not just sitting in the bank, because compounding works both ways. Compounding helps you when you're earning more than the inflation rate, and compounding hurts you. You're going backwards when you're earning less than the inflation rate. Okay, so now by the time you're 60, I think for a lot of folks, it would give you a lot of peace of mind if your house was paid off. I think that's a good goal. I talked earlier about having 25 times spending. By the time you're 60, you don't know what's going to happen to your health. You don't know what's going to happen to your job. So, my recommendation for myself, I want to be at that. I don't know your situation, but personally, I want to be at that 25 times spending well before I'm 60, if it's at all possible. Again, these things are aspirational. Sorry, I'm near an Air Force base, and that's what you're hearing is you're hearing our men and women in uniform keeping us safe. So thank you, pilots and crew of that aircraft. Okay, so by 60, again, 25 times your spending, I think it needs to be invested. And your asset allocation is super, super important. I do not think that you just want to wing that and say, oh, I think I should be 50-50 or 70-30 or whatever the number is. It's going to have a huge impact on what kind of returns you get from your investments. And it's also potentially going to impact your success as an investor. Because if you have too much exposure to the stock market as you get close to retirement, look at 2008, 2009, the market can move down fairly quickly, and that's going to be super scary. So you want to make sure that you have enough allocation to stocks that you beat inflation, but not so much so that it's super scary for you and you end up blowing out of the market at the wrong time. I do think it's nice to have your home paid off. Gives you a lot of flexibility by the time you're 60. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, give me a thumbs up, give me a like, and also I think if you found this video helpful, you're gonna like this video up here that talks about the average retiree income for people 65 and above, and 5 reasons to retire as soon as you can. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.